Hello everyone, welcome back to the Modelling Novice. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. I wanted to have a little bit of a quick chat.
Quick apology here. I am looking down a lot in this video. I initially tried to record this off the cuff and I spent about almost an hour rambling and had no sense. So I went and wrote a script, came back. So unfortunately I am looking down a lot reading that. So I do apologise. But I do hope you find what I have to say helpful.
For those of you who may have seen, a couple of weeks ago I put out a little bit of a short explaining that I've treated myself to a Heljan Class 17. Now this is the first time that I've actually bought a brand new locomotive properly. I'm not counting the Oxford rail sold as seen, Adams radial. So I want to really talk about why I chose that specific locomotive, what my thoughts were on it, what my experience was like, and why I didn't do an unboxing. Also a little bit of my thoughts on the Accurascale takeover of Heljan. So first things first, why did I choose this specific loco? Well, as I have a mix of eras of rolling stock from era 2 to era 7, most of the surviving prototypes left are in preservation, either at heritage railways or as static exhibits in museums, although there are some examples that run mainline rail tours. I like a lot of different things, and focusing on one railway, region or era doesn't appeal to me. I like the idea of having a bit more imagination put into things, and by modelling preservation I can better stick to that rule 1, which is of course the most important rule of all. Also the Severn Valley Railway is my closest heritage line, and the real life prototype of this exact number D8568 is based at the Severn Valley. I bought the model of this exact prototype in its current livery as well. So when Accurascale had announced that they had bought the Heljan brand, I was intrigued, even more so when I saw the new price of these. I couldn't justify paying £180 for a brand new model when I could easily buy 5 or 6 second hand for the same amount of money. But for under £100 I was interested, and with my birthday coming up, after a week or two of deliberating, I bit the bullet and I bought it. I did this fully aware that Heljan products have seen mixed reviews. Some people have had a number of issues, others have said their models are absolutely fine. It is also worth pointing out that some of the criticism focused on the price. Heljan models were called out as being more expensive for having less features. Buying this loco would allow me to see for myself just how much of that was actually true. So, the reasons I chose really not to do a review. Number 1, I'm still a relative newcomer returner to the hobby, so I don't have much first-hand experience of what the industry standard of modern ready-to-run models are. Second, a lot of reviews on this model have already been done. I just felt like I was going to saturate the market even further for something that most people have already made their minds up on. There's also nothing I can compare it to in my own collection. Pretty much everything else I own, barring that Oxford Rail Adams radial that I picked up, was all 20 plus years old. Some of it is even 40 years old. Next then, what was my experience like when I received the model? Well, the packaging was decent and offered good protection. The model came in one piece, no marks or blemishes anywhere. However, opening up the model wasn't the dream I'd hoped it would be. If you've seen the short, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So, once I'd lifted the cellophane off the model, it was apparent that there was some excess oil in places on the model. This was on the bogies and also on top of the cab roof. This was easy enough to clean up, but also I had to clean the packaging because once I put it back into store when not in use, it was going to get contaminated again if I didn't. The next thing I noticed was that one of the step plates on the side of the cab was a little bit wonky. Nothing I could really do about that, particularly the way that it was wonky, because it looks like it's actually part of the printing that's on it that's off, despite the fact that the section of that plate is actually in line. I really don't know how they've managed to do that, to be honest. On the other hand, is not that noticeable when the loco is running. Next was the buffer beam detail. Despite my best efforts with a pair of modelling tweezers, not all of the detail pieces came off in one piece. Some of them broke, which is frustrating that when they have to be removed in order to fit the couplings, but by doing so you risk damaging something that is shiny and brand new. Especially considering you've just paid a decent amount of money for it. Fitting the coupling also wasn't the easiest of tasks either, and once fitted I noticed it was also drooping. It does couple up to other stock, but it's not a great start. Certainly not a good first impression. So that was the preparation. Next, how was running in? Well, firstly I tried to do the running on first re-halt, but as soon as it hit the first radius curves it derailed. Now the model is very much advertised as a second radius or greater, so that was entirely on me. But it did mean that I had to set up a loop of track specifically on the floor in order to do this. I used third radius to be absolutely certain, but following that, running in had absolutely no problems whatsoever. The motor and flywheels were incredible. Even on analog it ran so well. Testing and running over points, however, afterwards was a mixed bag. Very slow speed, it was fine, but sometimes going a little bit faster, it did have a tendency to sometimes derail. Pulling ability is pretty good, as it pulls a 6-7 coach train without any problems. In fact, the booklet says it can do 15 on straight and level track. I've even been running it on our floor, which is uneven and can cause issues, but Class 17 has been absolutely fine. So my first conclusion is that as a model, despite those first impressions, I really like it. It's a great runner, it's a decent addition to my collection. However, if I had paid the original prices that these models were going for, I would have been very disappointed considering the issues that I'd encountered. The price I paid on the new website is much fairer reflection of this model's value. It's fair to say that some of the criticism aimed at Heljan was absolutely justified. The coupling conundrum is not ideal for a current model. Having a detachable buffer beam and options to fit the screw link or to fit a tension lock that don't have delicate breakable parts would have been a much better solution. Of course, the only reason this model was so cheap was Accurascale's takeover of Heljan. Despite the announcement video from Accurascale saying that Heljan were not in financial trouble, they looked to be a lot closer to the precipice than we were led to believe. Little Wicket Railway did some digging, and Heljan's most recent financial statements, as documented with Danish equivalent of Companies House, found that their profits over the last 2 years had almost vanished. If the trend were to continue, the company would have made a substantial loss over the next 12 months, and with a significant amount of debt owed to creditors. A spiral that could have bankrupted Heljan in 3 to 5 years if something hadn't changed. Accurascale's ambition, reflected in their restructure of Heljan to direct sales only as an affordable brand, makes a lot of sense. Flawed or imperfect models that are still desirable are much more attractive at those cheaper prices. Accurascale's pricing structure is much more rigid than market competitors, and that means that Accurascale models are priced to undercut their rivals. It is also fairer to smaller retailers. The wholesale price is fixed regardless of the order size. They can buy and sell 5 for the same prices and margins as the larger retailers who might sell up to 100 units. If I remember rightly, I'd heard somewhere that it had been confirmed that the lack of bulk discounts was why Hattons initially did not start stocking Accurascale products when they first came to market, but eventually relented when Accurascale's products became extremely popular. The fact that other manufacturers don't do this is unfair to both customers and smaller retailers. If large bulk discounts leave unsold models discounted at up to 50% off, it teaches customers to wait and teaches financial forecasters to make longer range guesses on the sales that they may not be guaranteed. It adds an extra level of risk into the proposition. Also leaves early bird customers that get in there because they desperately want it feeling a little bit annoyed because they've paid a higher price for something a lot of people are going to get cheaper later on down the line. Accurascale's business model eschews that in favour of fairness, supporting smaller retailers and customers. However, the nature of the announcement and the subsequent fallout has been explosive and divisive. The Support Your Independent Retailer campaign has a strong and vocal following, and the sentiment behind it is absolutely right. Retailers are the lifeblood of this hobby. I have bought all of my materials, spares, accessories, and even a number of my second-hand locos through retailers. They offer products and services the manufacturers can't. However, this campaign has been a leading of heart over head. It is misguided, especially when you take into consideration what I said about pricing structures. That's not to say Accurascale did nothing wrong. They should have warned all retailers and distributors under embargo in advance, but it did not. It also did not do enough to allay fears of going full direct to consumer only, as increasing number of its projects were becoming website Accurascale exclusives. The cancellation of all pre-orders of Heljan products and exclusives with retail partners was annoying, but in most cases no money had actually yet exchanged hands, so the fallout for that specifically was minimal. What was an afterthought, however, was the unsold Heljan stock at retailers. These are effectively unsellable without making a loss if they are in stock on Heljan's own new website. The Class 17s, 47, etc. are now being sold as cheaply as what the retailers paid wholesale. If retailers were warned, stock could have been discounted to at least break even or cover costs before the announcement to get rid of it, or Accurascale could have offered to buy back any unsold stock from retailers. The lack of foresight here has led to many people getting negatively affected and taking that personally. So yes, Accurascale could have handled the takeover much better, given retailers more time to adjust and be more open and honest with their strategy. Having to backtrack and clarify the position doesn't look great. There are certainly lessons to be learned here. This hobby needs both manufacturers, including Heljan and Accurascale, as well as the retailers, to succeed. We are in a golden era with much more variety and choice, the most high fidelity, high-tech models ever produced available right now. But the business structure needs to change to be fairer to everyone. Otherwise, short-term gains will lead to long-term issues. This hobby is quite niche. The industry behind it is much smaller than most other industries in the world. A lot of people are also very knowledgeable, especially when it comes to hobby-related history, trivia, prototypical knowledge, etc. You don't just enter this industry looking for a quick buck. You have to have a lot of investment in time, energy, money, and knowledge just to bring your first product to market. And then the product will be under a microscope. You aren't going to be able to do that without being a hobbyist as well. Rapido, for instance, don't stick with safe prototypes. They make more unusual but still popular or famous locos that they themselves wanted. The Sterling Single, the Jones Goods, well-known and loved locos that aren't as famous or prestigious as, say, a Gresley A3 or A4, an LMS Black 5, or even a Spam Can. But they're what people want, and they were willing to take that risk. But that is what makes them so successful. Heljan have been around for about 70 years, supplying the UK market for 25. The current management has made some unfortunate and costly errors, but I don't doubt for one moment they were not trying their best until the very end. The people at Accurascale are also hobbyists at heart, and it shows by their attention to detail and how they've pushed the boundaries of technology used in the models they produce. Hopefully that will lead to improvements on any upcoming and future Heljan releases, and also the range that they are taking into their own name. The hobby and the industry would be worse off without them, and I think people need to really be careful about what they wish for. Less competition means less incentive for innovation, less variety, less attraction for prospective newcomers. To finish off then, I think as long as Accurascale are true to their word about supporting retailers, this move will ultimately be a positive one. There are more options for affordable entry points into this hobby, where you have a wonderful network of local retailers for supplies, spares and services. We have healthy competition, keeping manufacturers on their toes. And if we continue to see the base of hobbies grow, there are more people and more money coming into this industry, which helps it grow even further. As for the model I bought, yeah, it's not perfect. Yes, my first impressions were quite poor, but objectively, it's not a bad model by any means. I will be keeping it, and I will be running it quite a lot. It's one of the best runners I've actually got, so I don't see any reason not to. It's very pretty and fits in with my sort of heritage theme perfectly. And for sure, I would buy another Heljan Loco if it fits the hole I'm looking for. For instance, if they bring back the Class 14, I would probably buy one at some point, or if they're only going on the second-hand market in good working order for the right price. You know, there are 14s out there in preservation, and I am kind of disappointed I missed out on the last lot. But I'm pretty sure, I do hope, that another chance will present itself at some point in the near future. So, that's all I have to say on this matter. I appreciate anyone who has tuned in and listened to me ramble on about all of this. If you haven't, please go and watch some of my other content. For the past 7 months, I've been filming my first attempt at building a layout with no prior experiences, as well as some running sessions, exhibition visits, and also a few videos of my attempts at keeping some of my older locos running. I've been Matt, the Modelling Novice. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.